The largest animals alive today did not begin in the ocean. That is the first thing to understand about whales. The blue whale, the heaviest animal known to have lived on Earth, moves through the sea with a body so perfectly adapted to water that it can feel almost impossible to imagine it belonging to the same story as hooves, legs, and land. A whale breathes air, gives birth to live young, nurses its calf with milk, and carries the deep mammalian inheritance of warm blood, lungs, bones, and ancestry. But its body is also shaped like an ocean-going vessel. Its front limbs are flippers. Its hind limbs are gone from the outside. Its nostrils open on top of the head. Its tail ends in horizontal flukes, driving the animal forward with an up and down motion. Everything about a modern whale seems to say ocean. And yet whales came from land, not from modern hippos. That is a common misunderstanding. Whales and hippos are close living relatives, but modern whales did not evolve from modern hippos any more than you evolved from your cousin. They share a common ancestor deeper in the mammal family tree, an ancestor that lived on land. From that branching point, one lineage eventually led to hippos and their extinct relatives, while another lineage led to the earliest whales. The story is not a ladder. It is not a straight road from one living animal to another. It is a branching tree, with many extinct side branches, experiments, failures, and forms that no longer exist. The fossil record of whales is one of the most powerful examples of macroevolution, because it does not give us only one strange fossil and ask us to imagine the rest. It gives us a series of bodies changing across time. Early land-dwelling or semi-aquatic mammals with whale-like ear bones, animals that could walk but also fed in water, amphibious hunters with heavy limbs and powerful tails, marine forms with nostrils shifting backward, later whales with reduced hind limbs, fully aquatic bodies, tail flukes, and eventually the great split between toothed whales and baleen whales. It is not a cartoon of one creature turning into another. It is a record of populations changing, branching, and adapting to new ecological opportunities over millions of years. To tell this story properly, we have to slow down and remove two misleading images. The first is the idea that evolution is a march toward perfection. Whales are not more evolved than their ancestors, they are adapted to a different way of life. A walking mammal near an ancient river was not incomplete. It was a real animal, living in its own environment, solving the problems of its own time. The second misleading image is the idea that evolution has a final goal. Evolution did not plan the blue whale at the beginning and then patiently worked it. It favored bodies that survived and reproduced in changing environments. The ocean giant was not the destination. It was one outcome among many. The return of whales to the sea is especially fascinating because it reverses a much older story. Hundreds of millions of years before whales, the distant ancestors of all mammals came from lineages that had already moved from water to land. Limbs, lungs, necks, weight-bearing skeletons, and new senses evolved in a world where land offered new possibilities. Much later, in the early Cenozoic, after the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs, some mammals began exploring aquatic environments again. They did not become fish. They remained mammals. They carried their land inheritance into the water, and that inheritance shaped everything about how whales swim, breathe, reproduce, and move. A fish usually moves its tail from side to side. A whale moves its tail up and down. That difference is not random. It reflects ancestry. Land mammals run with the spine flexing vertically, the back rising and falling as the limbs stride. When whale ancestors returned to water, that vertical movement became the basis for swimming. The horizontal tail fluke of a modern whale is not a fish tail. It is a mammalian solution to life in the sea. It is the old movement of a running body transformed into the engine of an ocean animal. The story begins more than 50 million years ago, during the Eocene, in a warmer world. The Indian subcontinent was colliding with Asia. Shallow seas, coastal wetlands, rivers, and estuaries created rich environments. Mammals were diversifying after the end Cretaceous extinction. New ecological openings existed on land and in water. In that world lived some of the earliest animals we recognize as whales, not because they looked like modern whales from the outside, but because their skulls and ears carry the signature of the cetacean lineage. One of the most famous is Pakicetus. If you saw Pakicetus live from a distance, you probably would not say, "That is a whale." You might think of a long-snouted, wolf-sized or dog-like mammal near a stream. It had legs for walking, It had nostrils far forward on the snout. It had no tail flukes. It did not look like a dolphin, a humpback, or a blue whale. But fossils are not judged only by surface similarity. In Pakicetus, the ear region of the skull shows features that link it to whales. One of the key structures is the involucrum, a thickened part of the auditory bulla associated with cetaceans. That means the story of whales begins not with an animal that already looked like a whale, but with a land mammal whose bones reveal its family identity. Pakicetus matters because it teaches a central lesson about transitional fossils. A transitional fossil does not have to be half of one modern animal and half of another. It does not need to look like a perfect blend drawn for a textbook. It only needs to preserve a combination of features that make sense in an evolutionary sequence. Pakicetus had a body suited for land, but its skull, especially the ear region, points toward whales. That is exactly the kind of evidence we expect if early cetaceans were still close to land, but already belonged to the whale branch. This is where the word whale can confuse people. When scientists call Pakicetus an early whale, they are not saying it looked like a modern whale. They are saying it belongs within the cetacean lineage. A family tree can include ancestors and relatives that look very different from their later descendants. Birds are dinosaurs, but a sparrow does not look like Tyrannosaurus. Humans are primates, but humans do not look like lemurs. Early whales were whales by ancestry and diagnostic anatomy, not by having the complete modern whale body plan. Pakicetus likely lived near freshwater environments, and isotope evidence from early whales helps reconstruct whether some of these animals drank freshwater, saltwater, or both. That kind of evidence matters because whale evolution was not only a change in shape, it was a change in habitat. Bones and teeth record chemical traces from the water and food animals used during life. Fossils are not just skeletons, they are archives. After Pakicetus, the story moves deeper into water, but not all at once. One of the most striking animals in this transition is Ambulocetus, often called a walking whale. The name itself has become famous because it captures the tension of the animal. Ambulocetus was a cetacean with strong limbs. It was capable of moving on land, but its body also points toward an aquatic life. It had a long, powerful body, a skull that could suggest ambush predation, and limbs that were probably useful in water. It was not a modern whale trapped on land. It was an amphibious predator at the edge between worlds. Ambulocetus is important because it makes the transition visible in a dramatic way. It shows that whale evolution passed through animals that were not simply land animals and not yet fully marine whales. They lived at the interface, rivers, estuaries, shorelines, shallow seas. They could exploit food in water while still retaining functional limbs. That is a key point. Evolution often works through intermediate ecologies, not just intermediate anatomy. An animal does not one day decide to abandon land. Populations can spend long periods using both land and water, and natural selection can favor traits that make them better at that mixed life. Imagine an animal like Ambulocetus near a river mouth. It may have waited partly submerged, moved awkwardly on land, and swum with powerful strokes in the water. Its world would not have been the open ocean. It would have been the margin, mud, current, shallow water, prey moving between habitats. This margin is often where evolution becomes especially creative. Boundaries create opportunity. A mammal that can use land and water has access to prey and refuge unavailable to animals locked into only one world. But amphibious life creates trade-offs. Limbs good for walking are not perfect flippers. A body good for swimming may become awkward on land. Eyes, ears, nostrils, limb proportions, spine movement, and bone density all face different demands in water than on land. The early whale fossil record is so powerful because it shows these systems changing in different ways and at different rates. Evolution is not one switch thrown at once, it is a mosaic. Hearing changes, limbs change, nostrils shift, the spine changes, the pelvis changes, feeding changes, reproduction changes. Each part responds to selection, constraint, and history. Myocetus gives us another remarkable glimpse into that mixed world. Fossils of Myocetus, including a pregnant female, suggest an animal still tied to land for birth. The position of the fetus has been interpreted as evidence of head-first delivery, the pattern typical for land mammals, rather than tail-first delivery seen in modern whales. That does not mean Myocetus was primitive or incomplete. It means it belonged to a stage in which whales had moved strongly toward aquatic life, while still retaining important links to shore. It hunted in water, but reproduction may still have pulled it back to land. That is one of the most intimate pieces of evidence in the entire story. Evolution is often described in terms of bones and body plans, but reproduction is just as important. A whale cannot become fully oceanic until birth, nursing, mating, and calf survival can happen in water. The transition to the sea was not only about swimming better, it was about solving the entire life cycle in a new environment. Modern whales are born in water, nurse in water, sleep in water, mate in water, migrate in water, and die in water. For their ancestors, each of those steps had to become possible. The Protocetids, a diverse group of early whales, show that this transition was not a single straight path. Some had limbs capable of supporting weight. Some were better swimmers. Some may have dispersed widely along coastlines. Fossils from places such as Pakistan, India, North Africa, and beyond show early whales spreading through warm seas. They were not all the same. Some lineages were experiments in amphibious life, others moved further into marine environments. Many branches ended. The modern whale lineage is only the survivor of a much larger evolutionary radiation. This is why it is misleading to draw a simple line: Pakicetus, then Ambulocetus, then Basilosaurus, then modern whale. Those names are useful for storytelling, but they should not be imagined as direct ancestor after direct ancestor in a neat chain. They are representatives of stages and branches. Some may be close to ancestry. Others are cousins showing similar transitions. Evolution is a tree with many twigs, not a classroom ladder. The fossil record gives us snapshots from that tree, enough to reconstruct the broad transformation. As whales became more aquatic, their bodies changed in ways that are easy to see. The nostrils began shifting backward along the skull. In a land mammal, nostrils at the tip of the snout make sense. In an aquatic mammal that must surface to breathe, while keeping much of the body submerged, nostrils farther back become useful. Modern whales have blowholes on top of the head. That position did not appear in one jump. Fossils show intermediate skulls, where the nasal openings are not yet fully modern, but have moved from the ancestral position. This migration of the nostrils is one of the clearest examples of gradual anatomical change. It is not magic. It is not a modern blowhole appearing suddenly. It is a sequence of skull shapes, each functional for the animal that had it. A nostril slightly farther back can still work. A more aquatic lifestyle can favor even further movement. Over time, the breathing opening becomes part of the streamlined surface of the head. A whale can surface, exhale, inhale, and dive with minimal interruption. The blowhole is not a separate invention detached from ancestry. It is the old mammalian nose moved and modified. The ears also changed. Hearing in water is different from hearing in air. Early whales already show whale-like ear regions, and later whales developed specializations for underwater sound. In modern toothed whales, echolocation becomes one of the most extraordinary sensory systems in the animal kingdom. But again, we should not push the story into a straight line of inevitable improvement. Not all whales echolocate. Baleen whales use sound in different ways. Toothed whales and baleen whales diverged into different sensory and feeding worlds. The whale family tree does not point toward one final ideal. It branches into different solutions. Locomotion changed just as dramatically. Early amphibious whales used limbs in water. Some likely paddled or pushed with their hind limbs. Others used the body and tail more strongly. Over time, the vertebral column became central to swimming. The forelimbs became flippers, no longer weight-bearing legs but control surfaces. The hind limbs became reduced and eventually disappeared externally. The pelvis detached from the spine and shrank. Modern whales may retain tiny pelvic bones inside the body, remnants of their terrestrial ancestry, but these are no longer walking limbs. The reduction of hind limbs is often misunderstood. People ask why an animal would lose legs, as if loss must mean degeneration. But in water, large hind limbs can become drag. If propulsion shifts to the tail and body, and steering shifts to the forelimbs, hind legs may no longer be useful. Selection can favor reduction if smaller hind limbs improve swimming efficiency, or if maintaining large limbs costs energy without benefit. Evolution does not preserve structures out of nostalgia. It modifies, reduces, repurposes, or removes them when conditions favor those changes. Basilosaurus brings the story into a more fully aquatic world. The name Basilosaurus means king lizard, a historical mistake from a time when its fossils were misidentified. It was not a reptile, it was an ancient whale, long serpentine in appearance and fully marine. Basilosaurus lived around the late Eocene and could not walk on land. Its body was elongated, its forelimbs were flippers, and its hind limbs were tiny compared with the body. Those hind limbs are among the most famous pieces of evidence in whale evolution. They were real limbs with bones, including feet, but they were far too small for walking. They are not useful as land legs. They are evolutionary remnants, modified in a fully aquatic animal. Basilosaurus is dramatic because it looks so different from both early walking whales and modern whales. It was not simply a modern whale with little legs. It had a body form of its own, part of an extinct branch of early fully aquatic whales. That matters. Whale evolution did not pass through a series of animals becoming more and more modern in a simple way. Basilosaurus was a successful animal in its own right, not a failed draft. It represents a stage when whales had already conquered the sea, but the modern whale groups had not yet taken their familiar forms. Alongside Basilosaurus, animals such as Dorudon show a more compact body and clear aquatic adaptations. Dorudon had tail-powered swimming and tiny hind limbs. It helps connect the earlier Archaeocete whales with later whale evolution. Fossils of basilosaurids show changes in vertebrae associated with tail flukes. Flukes themselves are soft tissue and rarely fossilized directly, but the vertebral column can tell us where the tail changed function. Fossils are often indirect, but indirect does not mean weak. A skeleton preserves the architecture that soft tissues attached to and moved. By the time of Basilosaurus, whales had crossed a major threshold. They were no longer animals merely visiting the water. They were marine mammals. They still breathed air, still nursed young, still carried mammalian ancestry, but their bodies were now committed to the ocean. Returning to land was no longer possible. Their limbs could not support them. Their body shape was aquatic. Their life cycle had shifted. The sea was no longer a feeding ground. It was home. That shift raises an important question. Why would mammals return to the ocean in the first place? The answer is not one reason. The early Cenozoic oceans offered food. Rivers, estuaries, coastlines, and shallow seas were rich with fish and other prey. Mammals on land were diversifying and competing in many environments. For some carnivorous or omnivorous mammals, water offered opportunity. Feeding near water could lead to better swimming. Better swimming could lead to more time in water. More time in water could favor changes in limbs, spine, senses, and physiology. Evolution often begins with opportunity, not destiny. A lineage does not need to foresee becoming a whale. It only needs small advantages in each generation. Water also changes the physics of life. It supports body weight, allowing animals to become larger in ways that land does not easily permit. It demands streamlining. It changes how heat is lost, how sound travels, how smell works, how breathing must be controlled, and how offspring are protected. Every shift into water creates new pressures. The whale lineage responded over millions of years, not by becoming fish, but by becoming aquatic mammals. This is why whales are such a strong example of macroevolution. The changes are large: land to sea, legs to flippers, nostrils to blowholes, walking to tail-powered swimming, terrestrial birth to aquatic birth, ordinary mammalian hearing to specialized underwater hearing, teeth to baleen in one major lineage, and echolocation in another. But those large changes are built from many smaller, traceable transformations. The fossil record does not show a cartoon leap. It shows a sequence of anatomical and ecological steps. The word macroevolution sometimes sounds abstract, but whale evolution makes it visible. Macroevolution is evolution above the species level, the origin of major groups, large-scale transitions, new body plans, long-term diversification. Whale evolution shows how a major transformation can be documented through fossils, comparative anatomy, embryology, genetics, and geology. The evidence does not come from one place. It comes from independent lines that converge. Fossils show transitional anatomy. Comparative anatomy shows modern whales retain mammalian structures and vestigial pelvic bones. Genetics places whales within artiodactyls, close to hippos among living mammals. Ankle bones in some early whales show features associated with even-toed ungulates, including the double pulley astragalus. Embryology shows that whale embryos begin developing hind limb buds that later regress. Geochemistry helps reconstruct habitat and diet. These lines of evidence are powerful because they are independent. They tell the same story from different angles. The ankle evidence is especially elegant. For a long time, early whale relationships were debated. Some paleontologists connected whales with Mesonychians, extinct carnivorous hoofed mammals, partly because of tooth similarities. Later molecular evidence pointed whales toward artiodactyls, the group that includes hippos, deer, pigs, camels, and cattle. Fossils then helped bridge the gap by revealing early whales with ankle bones characteristic of artiodactyls. The double pulley astragalus is a small bone with a large meaning. It links the whale lineage to even-toed hoofed mammals and shows how a detail far from the skull can reshape our understanding of ancestry. That is another lesson from whale evolution. Important evidence can be hidden in small structures. A casual observer sees a whale and thinks of size. A paleontologist may look at the ear bone, the ankle, the shape of vertebrae, the position of nostrils, or the density of ribs. Evolution leaves traces everywhere. The grand story is built from details. The relationship with hippos should be explained carefully. Hippos are the closest living relatives of whales, but the shared ancestor of whales and hippos was not a modern hippo. Hippos developed their semi-aquatic lifestyles separately and much later than early whales. This is why saying whales evolved from hippos is wrong. The more accurate statement is that whales and hippos share a common land-dwelling ancestor within the broader artiodactyl branch. Modern hippos are cousins, not parents. That distinction matters because evolution is often misrepresented as one living animal turning into another living animal. People ask, if whales evolved from hippos, why are there still hippos? But that question is based on a false premise. Cousins can exist at the same time because both descend from earlier ancestors. Humans did not evolve from modern chimpanzees. Humans and chimpanzees share common ancestors. Whales did not evolve from modern hippos. Whales and hippos share common ancestors. Once you think in branches instead of ladders, the confusion disappears. The same branching logic applies inside whale evolution. Pakicetus is not presented as the literal grandfather of every modern whale. Ambulocetus is not a direct step on a single escalator. Basilosaurus is not simply a halfway modern whale. They are extinct relatives that illuminate stages in the transformation. Some may lie close to the line leading to modern whales. Others are side branches. All of them help map the tree. After the archaeocetes, the whale story eventually branches into the two great modern groups, toothed whales or odontocetes, and baleen whales or mysticetes. Toothed whales include dolphins, porpoises, sperm whales, beaked whales, and orcas. Baleen whales include blue whales, humpbacks, fin whales, gray whales, and right whales. These groups are both whales, but they are very different in feeding, sensory systems, social behavior, and ecology. Toothed whales kept teeth and became active hunters of fish, squid, and sometimes marine mammals. Many evolved echolocation, using sound to build a picture of the underwater world. This is one of the most sophisticated sensory systems in nature. Sound travels well in water, and echolocation allows toothed whales to hunt in darkness, murky water, and great depth. A dolphin clicking through the sea is not just making noise, it is probing space. Baleen whales went another direction. They evolved filter feeding, using baleen plates, keratinous structures hanging from the upper jaw. Instead of grabbing individual prey with teeth, baleen whales take in large volumes of water and filter small animals such as krill, copepods, and small fish. Some lunge feed, some skim feed, some bottom feed. The largest animals in history evolved not by hunting the biggest prey, but by harvesting enormous quantities of small prey from productive oceans. That may seem surprising, but it makes ecological sense. Small prey can exist in huge numbers when ocean productivity supports them. A blue whale is gigantic because it can exploit dense patches of krill with extraordinary efficiency. The path from walking mammal to blue whale was not simply a path toward eating larger and larger animals. It involved radical changes in feeding strategy. Some early baleen relatives still had teeth. The transition to baleen was complex, and research continues to refine how teeth, suction feeding, gums, and baleen-related structures changed through time. Again, evolution is not a straight line. It is a branching set of experiments. The blue whale in this story is not the final goal of whale evolution. It is a recent and extraordinary outcome of baleen whale history, tied to ocean productivity, upwelling systems, and the concentration of small prey. Giant baleen whales became especially large relatively late compared with the origin of whales. That means the largest animal alive today is not simply the inevitable endpoint of the first walking whale. It is one branch's response to a particular set of ecological opportunities. Whale evolution also shows how old traits can be transformed rather than erased. The front limb of a whale is a flipper, but inside it are the same basic bones found in the forelimb of land mammals: humerus, radius, ulna, wrist bones, finger bones. The shapes and proportions have changed, but the underlying pattern reveals ancestry. This is homology, similarity due to common descent. A whale flipper, a bat wing, a human arm, and a horse forelimb are not identical tools, but they are built from inherited versions of the same skeletal plan. Evolution modifies what is already there. The whale tail, by contrast, is not a modified pair of hind limbs. The flukes are soft tissue extensions of the tail region, the hind limbs reduced separately. This matters because it shows evolution can solve a problem in different ways than an engineer starting from scratch. A fish has a tail fin supported by a different anatomy and moves side to side. A whale uses a mammalian spine and soft flukes, moving up and down. The result is similar in function, but different in origin. That is convergent adaptation shaped by different histories. Breathing also changed behavior. Whales must surface to breathe, but they live in water. That creates a life of controlled breath. Modern whales can dive for long periods, manage oxygen, tolerate pressure changes, and surface efficiently. These abilities did not appear fully formed in the first aquatic whale. Over time, selection favored better diving physiology, nostril placement, body streamlining, and oxygen storage. The transformation of whales is therefore not just skeletal. It includes soft tissues, blood chemistry, muscles, behavior, and life history, much of which we infer indirectly because soft tissue rarely fossilizes. The fossil record is incomplete, as all fossil records are. But incomplete does not mean empty. Whale evolution is famous precisely because the record is unusually rich for such a major transition. We have enough fossils to trace the broad pattern and many details. More discoveries continue to refine the picture. New species are described, old hypotheses are revised, and timelines are adjusted. Science does not weaken when it changes. It becomes more precise. A good example is the changing understanding of early whale relationships. Early researchers had limited fossils and sometimes classified animals incorrectly. Basilosaurus itself was once thought to be a reptile. Later discoveries corrected that. Mesonician hypotheses gave way as molecular and ankle bone evidence linked whales with artiodactyls. This history is not embarrassing for science. It is science working over time. Evidence accumulates. Explanations improve. The core conclusion that whales evolved from land-dwelling mammals has become stronger because many independent discoveries now support it. Why does this story matter so much? Partly because whales are emotionally powerful animals. They are huge, intelligent, vocal, social, and mysterious. Seeing one breach the surface is almost like seeing a mountain move. To learn that such animals descend from small land mammals near ancient waters is to feel the scale of evolution. Life is not fixed in the shapes we see today. Given time, selection, branching, extinction, and opportunity, a lineage can move from stream banks to open oceans, from walking limbs to flippers, from nostrils at the snout to blowholes, from small aquatic hunters to blue whales. But the story also matters because it is one of the clearest answers to the question, can evolution produce major transitions? Whale evolution says yes, not as a slogan, but as evidence. We can see intermediate forms, we can see anatomical sequences, we can see ecological stages, we can see links to living relatives. We can see the old body plan transformed, we can see the branching patterns. It is macroevolution with bones attached. There is no need to turn this into a culture war argument. The science is strong enough to speak in its own voice. The point is not to mock anyone. The point is to understand how evidence works. Fossils do not ask for belief in the abstract. They present anatomy in time, a land mammal with whale-like ear bones, an amphibious cetacean with strong limbs, a protocetid that may still give birth on land, a fully aquatic basilosaurid with tiny hind limbs, later whales with flukes, flippers, and nostrils high on the skull, living whales with vestigial pelvic bones and genetic ties to artiodactyls. Each line of evidence is a piece. Together, they form a picture. That picture is not finished, but it is clear. It is also beautiful. Imagine the transformation not as a diagram, but as a long natural history film. The first scene is not an ocean giant. It is a warm Eocene stream. A small mammal walks along the bank, listening, smelling, hunting, perhaps entering the water to feed. Its descendants or close relatives spend more time in shallow water. Limbs become better at swimming. Bodies lengthen, tails grow stronger, nostrils begin to shift. Some animals still return to land. Others move farther into the sea. Coastlines open pathways across regions. A lineage that once stepped into water now follows the water outward. Millions of years pass. The animals become less comfortable on land and more powerful in water. Birth shifts toward the sea. The spine becomes the engine. Forelimbs become control surfaces. Hind limbs shrink. The pelvis loosens from the backbone. The nostrils move back. Hearing changes. Teeth and feeding strategies diversify. Some whales remain hunters. Others begin the long story that will lead toward baleen. The ocean is no longer a place visited from land. It is the entire world. Then, much later, a blue whale rises through cold, productive water, opens a mouth large enough to engulf a small room, and filters krill by the ton. It is not a fish, it is not a reptile, it is a mammal whose ancient ancestors once walked. Every breath at the surface is a reminder of land. Every calf nursing underwater is a mammalian inheritance. Every up and down beat of the tail carries the movement of a running spine into the sea. That is the grandeur of whale evolution. It is not only that land animals became ocean animals, it is that they remained themselves and changed at the same time. They did not erase their past. They transformed it. Whales still breathe air because their ancestors breathed air. They still give milk because their ancestors gave milk. Their flippers still contain mammalian limb bones because their ancestors had forelimbs. Their embryos still reveal traces of developmental pathways inherited from limbed ancestors. Their bodies are full of history. Evolution is not a replacement of one identity with another. It is descent with modification. In whales, that phrase becomes visible on the scale of oceans. The transition also reminds us that evolution is opportunistic. The ocean did not call mammals back with a plan. It simply offered resources. Some mammals used the edge. Those that used it well left more descendants. Over time, the edge became a habitat, then a home, then an open sea. At each stage, selection favored what worked in that moment. Walking was useful until it was not. Hind limbs mattered until propulsion and life history changed. Teeth mattered in one lineage, while filter feeding transformed another. Echolocation evolved in toothed whales, not because all whales needed it, but because it worked for that branch's ecology. This is why progress is the wrong word. Progress implies a universal scale, as if a blue whale is better than Pakicetus. But Pakicetus was not trying to be a blue whale. It was adapted to its own world. Basilosaurus was not a failed modern whale. It was a successful ancient whale. Evolution is not a contest to become modern. It is a history of fit between organisms and environments. Modern whales are not superior in some cosmic sense. They are the survivors of branches that fit later oceans. Extinction is part of that story too. Many early whale branches are gone. Ambulocetus is gone. Protocetids are gone. Basilosaurus and Dorodon are gone. Countless forms that once filled Eocene seas have vanished. Without extinction, the whale family tree would look completely different. The modern ocean is not a museum of every experiment that ever worked. It is a living remnant of a much larger history. To understand whales, we must respect the dead branches as much as the living ones. Those dead branches are what make the transition legible. If only modern whales existed, their origins would be harder to imagine. If only one early fossil existed, the story would be weaker. But because the fossil record preserves many stages, we can see how the impossible became possible. The body of a whale is no longer a mystery that must be explained all at once. It is a series of changes distributed across time. This is one reason whale evolution is often taught as a classic example. It has drama, because land mammals return to the sea. It has fossils with memorable names. It has clear anatomical changes. It has living relatives that help reconstruct the tree. It has errors corrected by new evidence. It has ecological context. And it has a final living result that everyone recognizes. A child can understand the basic story, and a scientist can spend a career refining the details. But we should not let the clarity make the story feel simple. The real transition was messy. Populations varied. Environments changed. Fossils are found unevenly. Some features evolved faster than others. Some lineages were side branches. Some questions remain debated. The origin of baleen, the timing of certain sensory systems, the exact relationships of some fossil groups, and the ecological details of early whale life continue to be studied. The strength of the whale evolution story does not come from pretending every detail is settled. It comes from the overwhelming coherence of the broad pattern. That coherence is built from time, anatomy, and place. The earliest whales appear in early Eocene rocks. Fossils from South Asia reveal terrestrial and amphibious forms. Later forms become more aquatic and spread through marine environments. Basilosaurids become fully aquatic. Modern groups diverge later. The sequence is not random. It matches the expected direction of a land-to-sea transition. If fully modern whales appeared first and walking forms appeared later, that would be a problem. But the record shows the opposite. Land-associated forms first, amphibious forms next, fully aquatic forms later, modern whales after that. The geographic setting matters too. Many early whale fossils come from regions connected to the ancient Tethys Sea, a warm seaway rich in coastal environments. This was a plausible cradle for aquatic transition. The early stages were not happening in the middle of the deep Pacific. They were happening near coasts, rivers, estuaries, and shallow seas, exactly the kinds of places where land mammals might begin feeding in water and gradually become more aquatic. That ecological realism is one reason the story is so strong. It does not require a land mammal to leap directly into the open ocean. It begins at the edge, where many animals already live mixed lives. Today we can see mammals that use water without being fully aquatic. Otters, seals, hippos, polar bears, fishing cats, beavers. None of them are direct whale ancestors, but they show that the boundary between land and water is not absolute. Mammals can exploit aquatic resources in many ways. Whale ancestors were one lineage that carried that process much farther than any living semi-aquatic mammal. Seals and sea lions are helpful comparisons, but also reminders of difference. They are marine mammals too, but they still come to land or ice to breed. Whales went further. They became fully aquatic. That required deeper transformation. A seal's limbs still work in a dual world. A whale's body is committed to water. That commitment is why a stranded whale is helpless under its own weight. The ocean supports bodies that land cannot. Whales gained the sea and lost the land. This gain and loss is a recurring theme in evolution. Adaptation is not a free collection of improvements. It involves trade-offs. A streamlined body improves swimming but reduces flexibility on land. Reduced hind limbs reduce drag but end walking. A blowhole improves surface breathing but changes skull architecture. Specialization opens opportunities and closes others. Whale evolution is not a story of everything getting better. It is a story of bodies becoming deeply fitted to one world and less fitted to another. That makes modern whales astonishing, but also vulnerable. They are masterpieces of marine adaptation, yet they still must breathe air. They are ocean animals with lungs, dependent on surfacing. They are giants that rely on food webs, migration routes, communication, and calf care. Their evolutionary success does not make them immune to change. The history of whales reminds us that life is dynamic, but it also reminds us that adaptation is always tied to conditions. When a blue whale feeds, it carries 50 million years of history in every movement. The flipper that turns its body is a modified forelimb. The tail stroke is a mammalian spine moving vertically. The blowhole is a migrated nostril. The lungs demand a return to the surface. The calf that drinks milk is part of a mammal tradition older than whales themselves. The animal looks almost alien because it is so aquatic, but it is also deeply familiar because its body is built from mammalian heritage. That is the wonder of evolution. It makes the strange intelligible without making it less strange. Whales did not become less amazing when scientists discovered their land ancestry. They became more amazing. The blue whale is impressive as a giant. It is even more impressive as the descendant of animals that once walked. A humpback song is beautiful as a sound. It becomes more profound when we know it comes from a lineage that transformed hearing and communication in water. A dolphin's echolocation is remarkable as a sensory system. It becomes richer when placed within a branching history of toothed whales. The fossil record does not shrink wonder. It deepens it, The names Pakicetus, Ambulocetus, Myocetus, Dorudon, Basilosaurus, and Lanocetus are not just names on a timeline. They are windows into different answers to the same evolutionary challenge. How does a mammal live with water? Pakicetus still looks mostly terrestrial. Ambulocetus enters the water as a powerful amphibious hunter. Myocetus suggests a life still connected to land for reproduction. Dorudon and Basilosaurus show fully aquatic archaeocities. Lanocetus and other early mysticetes help us understand the beginning of baleen whale history. None of them alone explains whales. Together, they make the transition visible. The fossil record also shows that evolution does not move at one uniform speed. Some transitions happen relatively rapidly in geological terms, when ecological opportunity and selection pressure are strong. The early whale transition from land-associated mammals to fully aquatic forms unfolded over several million years, which is rapid in deep time but unimaginably long in human terms. Millions of generations can fit into that span. Small changes in each generation, sorted by survival and reproduction, can accumulate into bodies that look dramatically different from their ancestors. That scale can be hard to feel. Human lives are short. We notice change within decades and think that is long. Evolutionary time operates differently. A shoreline shifts, a climate regime changes, a species spreads, a population becomes isolated, limbs shorten slightly, tail muscles become more important, nostrils shift a little, birth behavior changes. Over hundreds of thousands and millions of years, these changes build. The whale story asks us to think beyond human time. It also asks us to think beyond individual transformation. No individual Pakicetus turned into a modern whale. Evolution happens in populations across generations. This point may sound basic, but it matters. Popular images often show one animal morphing into another, as if evolution is a magical transformation of a single body. The real process is population change. Some individuals have traits that help them survive or reproduce in a given environment. Those traits become more common. Lineages split. Many die out. Over time, descendants differ greatly from ancestors. The story belongs to generations, not individuals. In whales, those generations were shaped by water. Water rewarded certain traits again and again. Better swimming, better underwater hearing, better breath control, better streamlining, better reproduction in aquatic settings, better feeding strategies in marine ecosystems. Not every change occurred in every lineage, and not every lineage survived. But the direction of ecological pressure is visible. This is why whale evolution is not just a story about skeletons. It is a story about ecology. Early whales moved into aquatic food webs. Later whales diversified into hunters and filter feeders. Baleen whales became giants in relation to ocean productivity. Toothed whales explored sonar, deep diving, squid hunting, social predation, and many other niches. The body changes make sense only when tied to how these animals lived. A whale is an ecosystem-shaped mammal. When we watch modern whales, we are watching the living tips of a deep evolutionary tree. A sperm whale diving for squid, an orca coordinating a hunt, a gray whale feeding in sediment, a humpback lunging through a school of fish, a blue whale filtering krill, a river dolphin navigating muddy water. These are not variations on one perfect whale design. They are different branches, each shaped by different opportunities. The land-to-sea transition opened the door. Later evolution filled the ocean with different whale lives. That diversity also prevents a common misunderstanding. People sometimes say, whales evolved to live in the ocean, as if all whales became the same thing. But modern whales are extremely diverse. Some are small dolphins, some are enormous baleen whales, some live in rivers, some dive into the deep ocean, some hunt fish, some hunt squid, some filter feed, some use complex social strategies, some migrate thousands of kilometers. The return to the sea was not one final form, it was the beginning of a new radiation. This radiation took place in a world that kept changing. Oceans opened and closed, climate shifted, ice sheets formed, currents reorganized, prey communities changed. Marine mammals diversified and went extinct. Whale evolution did not end when whales became aquatic. That was only one transformation. The history afterward includes the origin of modern lineages, the rise of giant baleen whales, the evolution of echolocation in toothed whales, and the complex marine ecosystems of the present. If this story feels epic, it should. It covers more than 50 million years. It begins with mammals near streams, and ends with animals that cross oceans. It includes fossils from deserts that were once seabeds, skulls that show nostrils migrating, ankles that reveal hoofed ancestry, tiny hind limbs in animals that could never walk, and living giants whose bodies still remember land. It is one of the great narratives in the history of life, but its epic quality does not come from exaggeration, it comes from evidence. That is why the story should be told carefully. We do not need to say whales came from modern hippos. We do not need to pretend evolution was a straight march. We do not need to turn every fossil into a direct ancestor. We do not need to mock people who find the story surprising. The real evidence is strong enough and beautiful enough. The most convincing version of whale evolution is also the most honest one. A branching lineage of artiodactyl mammals moved into aquatic habitats during the Eocene. Fossils preserve many stages of that transition. Anatomical, molecular, developmental, and geological evidence converge. Modern whales are fully aquatic mammals descended from land-dwelling ancestors. And the journey from walking bodies to ocean giants was not planned, not linear, and not inevitable. It was natural history. That phrase matters. Natural history is not just a list of facts. It is the story of how life and environment shape each other over time. Whale evolution is natural history at its most cinematic. A small mammal steps near a stream. A descendant swims after prey. Another spends life between shore and sea. Later whales lose the ability to walk. Others become ocean predators. Some branches vanish. Some survive. One branch filters tiny animals and becomes the largest creature ever known. The story is enormous, but every step is grounded in ordinary evolutionary processes. When people ask, did whales really evolve from land mammals? The answer is yes. But the deeper answer is that whales carry the evidence in their bones, genes, embryos, and fossils. The question is no longer whether the transition happened. The scientific work now is about the details. Which fossil belongs where, how quickly certain traits changed, how different lineages moved, how feeding shifted, how baleen evolved, how echolocation emerged, and how climate and ecology shaped the radiation of whales. That is what mature science looks like. It does not stop at the basic claim. It keeps asking better questions. Why did some early whales remain tied to freshwater and estuaries, while others moved into marine habitats? How did changes in hearing evolve alongside changes in habitat? How did reproduction move fully into water? How did early whales regulate salt and water balance? How did body size evolve across different whale lineages? When did baleen whales become truly gigantic? How did toothed whales develop the sensory and social systems we see today? These are active scientific questions, and each new fossil can change part of the picture. The power of the whale story is that it welcomes new fossils without collapsing. New discoveries may shift dates, relationships, and details, but they fit into a robust framework. Land mammals returning to water and diversifying into whales. That is the difference between a fragile story and a strong scientific theory. A fragile story breaks when details change. A strong theory grows more detailed. While evolution is also a reminder that the modern world is not the standard by which all past life should be judged. Modern whales are familiar to us, so we treat them as the endpoint. But to an Eocene coastline, a semi-aquatic whale was not strange. It was part of that world's ecology. To a late Eocene sea, Basilosaurus was not a transition. It was a predator. To early baleen relatives, the future blue whale did not exist. Each animal lived in the present tense of its own world. That is a more respectful way to see prehistoric life. Fossils are not failed attempts to become modern. They are remains of successful lives in vanished environments. Pakicetus did not know it was early. Ambulocetus did not know it was intermediate. Basilosaurus did not know it would become evidence. These animals lived, hunted, reproduced, and died. Only later, from the perspective of deep time, do we see the pattern. And the pattern is extraordinary. A lineage of mammals stood at the water's edge, and over millions of years, followed opportunity into the sea. Their descendants changed their limbs, senses, breathing, swimming, feeding, and reproduction. They split into hunters and filter feeders. They survived extinctions and changing oceans. They became dolphins, sperm whales, humpbacks, orcas, gray whales, bowheads, and blue whales. The largest animal alive today is part of that history, and so is every small dolphin riding a bow wave. The ocean did not erase their past. It wrote over it. That is why whale evolution stays with people. It is not only a scientific case study. It is a story about transformation without a designer, continuity through change, and the strange creativity of life. It shows that a body can be both ancient and new, both constrained by inheritance and opened by possibility. It shows that evolution can produce forms so different from their ancestors that they seem impossible, until the fossils reveal the path. At the end of the story, picture a whale surfacing. The body rises from dark water, the blowhole opens, air blasts upward. For a moment, the animal bridges two worlds, lungs taking air from above, body supported by the sea below. That breath is the whole story in one gesture. A whale is an ocean animal that must return to the sky to live. It is a mammal that went back to water and carried land inside its body. There is one more reason this transition is so persuasive. It does not depend on one kind of evidence being interpreted in isolation. Suppose we had only DNA from living whales and hippos. That would strongly suggest a close relationship, but critics could ask what the extinct forms looked like. Suppose we had only Pakicetus and no molecular evidence. That would suggest something important from anatomy, but the broader family tree might remain uncertain. Suppose we had only Basilosaurus hind limbs. They would be fascinating, but by themselves they would not explain the entire journey. The strength comes from convergence: ears, ankles, skulls, limbs, vertebrae, isotopes, embryos, genes, and geological age all point in the same general direction. Independent clues are powerful because they do not have to agree, but in this case they do. Think about the ear bones again. Hearing is not the most glamorous part of a whale. A giant fluke is easier to film, a skull is easier to display, but the ear region is one of the great signatures of cetacean identity. It links animals that look very different on the outside. That is how evolution often reveals itself. The most obvious features can be shaped strongly by lifestyle, while smaller or more technical features preserve ancestry. A whale-shaped body can evolve for swimming, but a specialized ear region, an ankle bone, or a pattern of limb bones can tell us where the animal belongs. Paleontology is often the art of listening to quiet bones. The same is true of developmental evidence. Modern whales do not grow full hind legs, but developmental system still carries traces of the old plan. In embryos, early limb buds can appear and then regress. This does not mean a modern whale is trying to become a land animal. It means development is inherited and modified. Evolution often changes timing, growth, and suppression, rather than inventing every structure from zero. Vestigial pelvic bones in living whales are not useless mistakes in a simplistic sense. They are inherited structures that can still have roles in muscle attachment and reproduction, while also testifying to ancestry. A vestige is not evidence that evolution failed. It is evidence that history remains inside the body. The return to water also changed the senses, in ways we cannot fully see from the outside. A land mammal lives in a world of airborne smells, ground vibration, light through air, and sounds that travel differently. Water transforms all of that. Smell becomes less central in open marine life, sound becomes more powerful, vision must work through murk, depth, and filtered light. Touch and pressure matter. Early whales were not only changing their skeletons, they were entering a different sensory universe. That may be one reason the skull is so important in the fossil record. The head contains breathing, hearing, feeding, and orientation, all of which had to be reshaped for water. Feeding also changed repeatedly. The earliest whales were probably carnivorous, and many had teeth suited for catching fish or other prey. Basilosaurids were predators. Toothed whales continued the predatory tradition in many forms, from small fish-eating dolphins to sperm whales hunting squid and orcas hunting large prey. Baleen whales took a different route, and that route eventually produced giants. This reminds us that whale evolution is not simply the story of becoming more aquatic. It is also the story of entering the sea and then discovering many ways to make a living there. The ocean did not produce one whale lifestyle, it produced many. The origin of baleen is especially fascinating because it shows that even after whales became fully aquatic, major transformations continued. Early mysticetes were not all toothless gentle filter feeders from the start. Some early relatives had teeth, and paleontologists continue to study how feeding shifted from biting or suction-based feeding toward the baleen filtration systems seen in living mysticetes. This transition matters because it eventually opened a path toward enormous body size. When a whale can exploit dense swarms of tiny prey, it can turn small animals into a gigantic body. The largest predator-like bite is not the only route to size. Sometimes the path to becoming huge is learning to feed efficiently on the very small. The evolution of whale size also helps correct another false steer. Bigger is not always later, better, or inevitable. Some ancient whales were large, some modern whales are small, and giant baleen whales became especially huge under particular ecological conditions. Body size evolves in relation to food, climate, predation, migration, and reproduction. The blue whale is not simply the most evolved whale. It is a specialized giant built for a world where seasonal productivity can create immense patches of food. Without those food webs, a blue whale body would not make sense. Every giant depends on something smaller. That ecological dependency brings the story back to humility. Whales may look like sovereigns of the sea, but their lives are tied to plankton, krill, fish, currents, ice, temperature, migration route, and soundscapes. Their evolution is not just about becoming powerful, it is about becoming connected. A whale is a large animal made possible by countless small processes. The same was true in the Eocene. Early whales were shaped by shorelines, prey availability, water chemistry, and the geography of shallow seas. Evolution works through bodies, but it also works through environments. This is why the phrase, "return to the sea," is both accurate and poetic. The individual animals did not remember the sea. Pakicetus did not carry a plan to become a blue whale. But in a deeper evolutionary sense, a lineage of mammals whose distant ancestors had once come from aquatic life, moved back into water, bringing with it the legacy of land. The result was not a reversal to fish, it was something new, mammals that became oceanic without ceasing to be mammals. They took air-breathing, milk-feeding, warm-blooded bodies into the sea and reshaped them until the ocean seemed to have made them. That is the final image worth keeping. Whale evolution is not a ladder from primitive to advanced. It is a tide moving through a branching tree. Some branches reached the shore and stopped. Some entered the shallows. Some became amphibious hunters. Some became fully marine predators. Some disappeared. Some gave rise to the toothed whales and baleen whales alive today. At every point, the animals were real, complete, and adapted to their own worlds. The story is not about half-made creatures. It is about whole creatures in changing environments, each generation carrying the past a little farther into the water. The ancestors walked, the descendants sing in the deep.